You're being a big baby. Just relax. You'll be fine. Don't be a baby. Get yourself together before it's too late.
Why don't I do the bad?
Oh my.
Bitty bitty bo bop.
Oh my God. I'm trying to get myself together. You know, like the scene says, get yourself together or pull yourself together or whatever. There's really no reason to laugh tonight or even joke because things are just that serious, at least in my state of mind. But it's good to see everybody because it is Divided We Stand, and it's Saturday the 19th of March at 9 o'clock or so Eastern time. And here we are with our buddy with the echo, and it isn't gone. No, it isn't gone, but we're going to get used to it. And you know, it might even add a little bit to the show. So without any further ado, as I always say, David Price. Dave, how you doing?
Brian, my mother told me if you can't say anything nice about a person, don't say anything at all.
Well, I'm going to let everybody in for a little bit of this or that, okay? Now, Dave and I did try to fix the audio. Now, I don't want to get in an argument online, but if you'll remember last week we had Kevin Wheeler on, and he might be on tonight. I don't know if he'll be coming on or not. I did send him an invite for after 10, but Kevin had no problem. And I had asked Kevin, you know, was there any problem with the echo or this or that? And he said, no problem whatsoever. So for whatever reason, we can't figure out why Dave has an echo. On the other hand,
I can figure it out. It's because you don't know what the hell you're doing.
I think it sounds fine. I can hear you perfectly well. I guess we need to ask the folks out there. Can you hear David properly? Well, you know, I know somebody mentioned. They said, you know, were you smoking a joint before you were on the show last time? But no, it is legitimately an audio problem. But every level says everything's fine, and you're just all going to have to get used to just a slight slow speech from Dave, but in a way that's good because you'll be able to understand everything he says. Isn't that right, Dave?
Well, if I had somebody who had any knowledge of how to work this goddamn system, I wouldn't be having this problem. So I'm gonna soldier through because I care about our listeners. You obviously don't.
Look,
or you would learn.
You're going to have to talk to the guys at Ecamm here. You know, I sent you the link. Every level says that everything's right.
Well, just let me say this.
It does. Look, Dave, you must admit, you talk quickly. So this does slow you down. And
I don't like that. I want to be able to talk as quick as I normally can because sometimes people really want to hear what I have to say to get it done.
You sound like you're at an auction there. So, oh, hold it. Good news. Sandy from Environmental Coffee House says you sound fine now.
Well, that's Sandy. Thank you for that. Unfortunately, Brian has screwed up the things coming into my computer, So, but because Sandy, I admire you and all of those who listen and the show that you do. And I've been on your show. Thank you for inviting me. And it's always been a very professional experience, unlike Saturday night with Brian Bozo Weinstein.
Okay. Listen, I want to get this out of the way also. I'm wearing my blue shaded glasses. This type of glass that helps you relax. It's not great for the show because there is that reflection from my TV screen or my monitor, but who cares about that? So we'll
Oh, now, why would you care about how you look? Oh,
No,
I
I don't.
understand
It's
that.
just that this thing is kind of disturbing. I mean, if I go
Well,
with
why don't
my
you
reading
take it
glasses,
off?
that's fine. But I'll probably have a headache using my reading glasses the whole time. I'll go back and forth. How's that?
Why don't you get your glasses someplace other than the dollar store?
I get them at Kmart or Walmart. I don't even go to Kmart. What am I talking about? No. You know what? I'll tell you why, Dave. I have a pair of prescription reading glasses, bifocals. I don't know. It was 150 bucks 10, 15 years ago, and I lose them all the time. Then I find them, and then they don't fit right. A $5 pair of reading glasses are just fine with me, so I'm not going to worry about that.
Well, isn't that what you paid for your eCam system?
Yes, system.
Four
By the
dollars
way, it
and
was
fifty
interesting.
nine cents.
I'll have you know that
Come
I
on, Veg.
watch Hal Sparks, Dave, and today Hal Sparks dropped Ecamm and he went to Streamlabs, which is a different thing. I think he said that you could do more with it. So I'm not going to jump ship. I still like Ecamm a lot, and
I like eCam when I use it, but when you use it, you don't have any idea what you're doing.
I'm thinking that you're not going to like this, Dave. I think you need to get Loopback. It's going to cost you around
Why do
30
I need to
bucks
go back and loop something?
because the Loopback will allow you to. I don't want to turn this into a technical show, but it'll allow you to isolate each program's volume.
Can I say something about that? It will allow you, rather than get loop back, I'd rather get another partner who knew what they were doing, because that would also allow me to be able to function
Okay.
correctly.
Okay.
Gary, any criticisms you have of Brian, I agree with him.
Okay. All right. Look, we got a lot of comments already. Anthony Davis.
Hi.
He even said I look very stylish in any case. So there you go, Dave.
Anthony is one of the nicest, kindest people I've ever met. So that's really kind, Anthony, to say there that Bobo the Wonder Chimp looks stylish.
All right. So anyway, let's start off our conversation with some nice.
What do you want to talk about, Brian?
Basic sound effects. Okay, a little bit down and such, but smooth. So we'll do this. Yeah. Some Al Gromer Khan. All right, Dave.
Brian.
It was reported today that the Russians used a hypersonic weapon, and our Defense Department confirmed that it was a hypersonic weapon. Now, let's just take a quick look. See if we have something here about hypersonic weapons. Okay, yeah, here we go. Just so everybody can see. Now, there's a problem. Hypersonic weapons can go Mach 5, which, I don't know, just basically means can go fast as shit, okay? Like a lot faster than even fast shit, okay? So, apparently, the Chinese and the Russians are the only ones with this technology at this point. I believe there was a report that when Donald Trump met Putin in Helsinki, the hypersonic weapon came up, and then Trump said to Putin, "Oh, well, yeah, well, we'll get one of those." And Putin said to him, "Yeah, but we have it now." Well, as you know, we started offering them more Stinger weapons and some type of drones called Switchblades, which are highly effective. Something we normally wouldn't give a company that is a country that's a non-NATO member. So the Russians used a hypersonic weapon which cannot be detected by us. That's the one area where we're behind. Only China and Russia have it. You can load a nuclear weapon on a hypersonic missile. You can load a regular missile. So they used one and hit an armament warehouse. Soldiers died. So we're getting this tit for tat type of thing. But this really worries me because, Dave, you and I have grown up always learning that we have the advantage over the Russians. For the exception of Sputnik. You were alive during Sputnik, so you may or may not remember that. But this scares me.
Very well.
This scares me, and you can give me input into that compared to this, because it does seem like we're doing this, now they're doing that, and the hypersonic missiles bother me. Because as it says in this article here that, what if, an example, we're just throwing this out here, what if they decide to try to intimidate us, so they just, lob one into Edmonton, Alberta, and then we have to respond. Now, our weapons will work against them. Pardon me?
No, go ahead.
Our weapons will still work. Not that I want to even discuss nuclear weapons, but they'll still work against, the Russians. But this is a real problem because it almost assures us that they can do a lot of destruction, depending on how many missiles they have. And even if we have them, they can still do it to us, and we don't have a way to stop it. And again, we're used to always having better technology and whatnot. But this bothers me because once you start, you get these warheads that want to keep going higher and higher, it means to me that this thing is going to escalate. And I'm making, I don't want to say a prediction, I'm only speculating, but where do we go after the hypersonic weapons? And given this information, and we do know that, again, the Defense Department said it did hit and it was in use. What is your feeling about this?
Well, Brian, we're at war. So what does that mean? Until one side or the other wins or is satisfied, the war will continue. Correct?
Correct.
Both sides, if you put us on one side and the NATO with us and some scattered other Canada and places like that. Then on the other side, we have Russia. China is kind of hands off right now. China is going to do what's best for China, right? Saudi Arabia is going to do what's best for Saudi Arabia. Russia, who is Vladimir Putin, is going to do what's best for Vladimir Putin. Do you really think that the Russians wouldn't use everything at their disposal if Putin decides that's what we want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I sound awful cavalier saying this. The only possibility of avoiding the nuclear option is to have no nuclear weapons. That dream ended in 1945. Now we find ourselves in a conflict where one side, Russia, who's actively involved, has nuclear weapons, and we, who have chosen rightfully to support the Ukraine, have nuclear weapons. I don't think we would use ours first. Despite Mr. Trump's comments at least 3 times in the White House when he said, it's pretty well been verified, I don't understand. We have these weapons. Why can't we use them? Well, you can't use them because the effects are unknown, but almost unimaginable. it doesn't have to even destroy a country. Just the mere fact that somebody used a nuclear weapon will change the face of the world forever. And where does it end, Brian? Back to what I said at the beginning. It ends when one of the two parties, Russia or the Ukraine, is satisfied. Let's look at the Ukraine first tonight. What would satisfy them, Brian, do you think?
Well, I'm sure they don't want to give up any territory because they already gave up Crimea.
Right.
But Luhansk and Donbass, I think just to get back on their feet, they might be willing to give some type of shared this or that. But
okay,
I don't think Putin is willing to give up the Black Sea. He wants the entire coast, and he wants Odessa. Right. You know, and by the way, I think we had 3 ships in the Black Sea a couple of weeks ago, and I think we pulled them out.
Now, was that good or bad? What do you think?
I guess it was good because they have so many Russian ships in the Black Sea, and they consider that sea theirs. Part of the sea is probably mined to shit, you know, because the Ukrainians don't really have a naval force. They certainly don't have submarines, so you just have to mine around the major cities. But the fact that Russians can shoot cruise missiles and now hypersonic missiles from the Black Sea, and that's where the Russians are doing better, that bothers me. I think
just for the people, Brian, you did a good job. You're going to be the expert tonight on it. Hypersonic means
very fucking fast. Mach 5.
Literally.
Right, it's like 10,000 miles an hour or whatever. I don't even know what Mach 5 is.
If
somebody
you
else
remember, which is, I didn't quite understand the whole thing. But you remember when I talked a couple of shows ago about the guy I met who was in cybersecurity and said, tell you, he told me, and said, tell all your friends, about 2 things you can do. Get some cash out in case cyber does make the bank.
Thanks, Rudel.
Crash. And also,
so 5,000 miles an hour, so roughly 1 Mach for every 1,000. Okay.
Right. And then the second thing he said was to have a full tank of gas. Don't say I'm going to get them on Tuesday because you might need to move. And then the other thing he said, which was interesting, is he mentioned the very weapons you're talking about, hypersonic. And just as you pointed out tonight, and you've said, we don't have them. Now, we have a whole lot of other things. And Rudel, I'm going to go with you. Let's look at a couple of scenarios, Brian. And please, everybody out there, join. It's not that we're doing the horror show.
We need your help.
We're just speculating, right?
And we should, because we are in a situation where, metaphorically, the world's on fire.
Correct. Well,
if not literally.
I don't even know if it's metaphorically.
Right.
Well, I'm just going to throw one climate thing in.
Antarctica, that's a problem already.
Did I read that in the polar region, I don't think it was Antarctica. It was Arctic, I think.
That's Antarctica. 70 degrees above normal, yes.
70 degrees.
And that's approaching their winter.
It's never been that high, that kind of drop. Now, as this reporter writing about it said, and quoting some scientific, they said that's relative because it's so cold that 70 degrees doesn't pump it up to 90.
Right, but even in the Antarctic winter, we're talking maybe negative 70, so you're still going to go above freezing, and that's a problem.
Correct.
And then the ocean gets really warm, and that's a bigger problem.
So, let's look at a couple possible scenarios and see what would happen. And
By the
you're
way,
going to be
I'm going to interrupt for a
ever.
second. Veg, that I didn't know. If we get Kevin on at 10, he could probably help us with that. I don't know. I mean, already Canada and Russia are in a Twitter war, so that's a scary thing too.
Well,
Okay, but we'll get back.
let's
I'm
look at
sorry, Dave.
all the
Okay.
things. No, no, no. Okay, so let's start with nuclear and work our way back. So nuclear is the ultimate weapon, right, Brian? That we know of, yeah.
Ultimate, but they do have the capability of using a hypersonic nuclear weapon, which is you can't stop.
It's still a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, but I'd rather face one that's not hypersonic than hypersonic.
Okay, no, Brian, I have done a little research on that. If they fire, say, 20 nuclear warheads at the United States, you're really going to think you're going to hit all 20 and get them out?
No.
So what we're talking about is what? Something that can fly across the United States in what? Hypersonic can do it in what?
Well, let's just put it this way. If it can go 5,000 miles an hour, it's going to get here in probably an hour and 20 minutes.
Okay.
But hold it.
So
if that goes into space, I take that back, because don't forget the Earth is rotating at 1,000 miles an hour, so you have to take that into consideration. Maybe
the point is,
15 minutes.
The point is, just for everybody out there, is there are two things about hypersonic, I think, and I want to make sure that I'm correct. One is, as you've said, it's very fast.
Right.
And because it's so fast, it's much harder to knock out.
Especially if it's not an intercontinental ballistic missile. If it's coming from a sub, you're screwed.
And there we are. Now that's been interesting. Okay. Do you know? I don't. Do you know where the Russian submarines are right now?
I would imagine all over the Atlantic.
Right. You know, and
they can do that.
Right now, I think you have to play the odds. Right now, Ukrainian people are in a world of hurt.
Dave, can you bring your volume up just a little
sure.
bit?
Anyone in the Ukraine tonight is subject to die much quicker than any American, right? But Europe may be a Russian target before we were. So you say, well, that's pretty good. But what about this? We have a pact to defend every NATO country, correct, Brian?
Absolutely. That's Article 5. You have to do it.
So any attack on a NATO country is considered an attack on the United States. So I think some people, not our listeners so much, because they're pretty knowledgeable people, but some people are looking at. So yes, Ukraine, danger spot 1, Europe, danger spot 2, but the United States, although it's not located on the European continent, is, because of NATO, a European country, correct?
Say that again. Which one is Europe?
No, I'm saying, America. Somebody might say, well, America's not in Europe. Well, no, but because we're a NATO country, we might as well be.
Right. And by the way, Moldavia is right on the border of Ukraine. So, and I mean, that's getting close to the Black Sea. It looks like Russia's going to take that too. Now, they're not NATO, but like I say, this thing is getting a lot nastier than
that's another
we think.
question, Brian, and I don't have an answer to it.
I'm just thinking like people are just kind of waiting.
Putin continues to target non-NATO countries, right?
Right.
What do we do?
Well, Dave, I want to go backwards for a second. Let's get into what's happening in Russia, because I think that's important to look at too. Morgenstern, the #1 Russian rapper, It was in exile already. He was in the Emirates simply because he said that he thought Russia spent too much money on World War II parades. Now, he left Russia maybe 5 or 4 months ago, and he has a friend who's a rapper in Ukraine, and he just made a video saying something to the effect, and this was an important day for this show. He said, "You're lucky you're from a country where you're not born to be afraid." And I think that's the point right now. You saw that essentially Putin had a MAGA rally in Moscow. Mm-hmm. He has called anybody who goes against him the fifth column, and that they're scum and bastards, and they'll go after them. So he's got people scared, and he's closing the curtain, so to speak, on Russia. So this worries me because we've had a lot of people who have spoken out in Russia, and they've paid for it in the streets. But now what are they doing? A lot of the progressives are leaving the country. They're going into Georgia. They're doing these staycations, and it makes it even harder. And unless you get
harder to do what, Brian?
To get everybody together to the protest, because essentially, Dave, if you're going to have a coup, you'd have one or two things that can happen if they go against him. It could be a coup,
right?
Or maybe three. He could be killed, which then might lead to a coup. Could be a revolution, but that kind of looks hard.
Yeah.
Right. So right now, it seems like unless the progressives and the oligarchs can tie together, this is what a Russian professor at Harvard said, you would need that, basically. Somehow a connection between the oligarchs who have something to lose with Putin. They want to, because they owe everything to Putin, but they don't want to have everything closed off to them. It's getting much more difficult. So it seems that unless you get those two groups together, you're not going to get any protests, and it's going to get more vicious. And he probably has fired a number of people already because he knows that we found out about him saying China. He needed weapons from China.
He fired. Now, I don't know the timing of this, but he fired 1,000 people prior to this, worried about poisoning. Now, I don't know what the time.
Well, I wouldn't doubt that, because don't forget, he might live in a bunker somewhere on the border of China, as far as we know.
Right.
He doesn't really hang out in Moscow. And when he does, you see these desks that are far away, and he doesn't show himself. He never showed himself taking a COVID vaccine, even his own.
Now, Anthony, can you put that back up again?
Yes.
For a moment. I think Anthony raises an interesting point that Americans might not quite all understand. None of us should be frightened by a free press. We have it according to our Constitution. Free elections, we've always had them. Democracy, I mean, we are a republic, so you could say a limited democracy, but we saw that. And our markets are open to the fact that, we've got billionaires who run, and we don't call them oligarchs, right?
Right, but obviously there's a difference.
My point is this: Putin does fear that. Everything there would point out his weaknesses. Now, I would ask any Trumper tonight who runs across this.
A little bit more volume, Dave. Okay, just a little bit.
I've got it up full.
You do?
I've got it up full.
Because I've got you.
Yeah, so it's on. So I've got it. That's all I've got.
All right. Good enough.
So I'll try this. Maybe this will work.
The only way would be if you got closer to the mic.
Yeah, I know. Listen, so again, I would ask any Trumpers who might stumble across this to just compare Putin and Trump. And if you can find the differences, it's tough. The things that Putin fears are the things, for the most part, that Trump fears. Now, you used the term, and I was thinking of it, and you used it before me, used the term fifth column. Just so I know that you and I are talking about the same thing, how do you define a fifth column, Brian?
Fifth column is considered any group of people who are willing to help the enemy, basically.
Correct. I mean, I'm not saying you're correct.
Right.
I just want to make sure we agree. Do you not think in America we have a fifth column? Don't
Absolutely.
You think Fox is a fifth column? Don't you think Tucker is a general in the fifth column?
Well, don't you think, Dave, just the very fact that 8 Republicans refuse to support the efforts in Ukraine? Because now, as you've seen on our media, you've seen Josh Hawley and Tucker Carlson. All their interviews are now all over Russian media, and it makes it look like
that's something else,
you know,
that I think is so important. The Russian dissidents have to look at America as being their hope, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Or their idol, or what is it, the shining city on the hill, or And now you've got the former president of the United States. You've got the most watched news network in America. And you've got high-ranking political officials being quoted accurately on Russian television. So my point is, are they any different than Tokyo Rose was?
Right.
Because
they have to know that their opinion is going to be expressed on Soviet propaganda. Right?
Well, yeah. So who are they for? Russia or the Ukraine? They're for Russia. Why?
Because it's a coincidence of once, too. I mean, I don't think there's any real love for Russia per se, but it's the idea of what Russia has. I'll give you an example. Can I show you something, Dave, real quick?
Sure,
I think it's important to show you this. This, you got to see this. Hopefully this, I'm going to take off this for a second here, okay? Make sure loop it. Now I'm going to get a little bit of echo, and you so just don't worry about it right now, okay? Okay, here we go.
I look at Russia. Can we give a round of applause for Russia? Jesus Christ. Yes. Absolutely.
Well, that's the podium that Marjorie Taylor Greene then appeared at. And
okay, let me take that off, loop back, Dave, and then I'll get right back to.
Okay.
All right.
I have a question, Brian. For every person who sees that, is that any different than in 1942, standing up and saying Hitler, Hitler, Hitler?
No, I think that there is one difference, and that is that because of the Trump movement, that kind of thing has become acceptable. So now Biden is becoming a wartime president. This, you're not going to believe me on this, but it's almost as if Biden has to be a Lincoln and a Kennedy at the same time. And
there's some truth in that.
That, to me...
Yet, so far, and remember, my belief is that every day America has Joe Biden is better than any day it ever had Donald Trump. Okay? But
especially for Ukraine. I think they have benefited from that.
Because I was born where I was, which is the township where you now reside, there's a village there called Seabrook, and that's where I grew up. And it was formed by a farming oligarch by the name of C.F. Seabrook. And even though he was a Republican, he contacted FDR. He was a huge fundraiser, not fundraiser, but a fund giver. But he had his people down there, and he kind of offered FDR a deal that benefited both. FDR had completely trashed the Constitution and the protections of the First Amendment by interring, which means basically jailing in concentrated camps, even though the horrors of genocide in the concentration camps have kind of changed the meaning of the word concentration camp, but really it was just a concentrated area camp where people were held in all over the West, Manzanar, and a number of other places. And they were brought to Seabrook to work, and the rest, as they say, is history. But right now, do we take those supporters of Russia and form that camp? And if we don't, why not? When there were very few, almost no Japanese support of Japan from the Japanese Americans. And yet there's strong support on the part of both elected and Republicans and people who call themselves Republicans. So do you see a difference? Why we should, not saying that what we did to the Japanese American was right. It wasn't. Especially considering two things. They weren't speaking on Japan's behalf, and the Japanese American soldiers who fought for the United States were among the most decorated units of the war.
Right.
So we have, I believe, just one more example of people and Americans being traitors.
Right. Where's Michael Flynn now,
Well, I don't really care where any of them are.
Right, but I'm saying he hasn't said a peep about this crap.
I care about the ones that are.
And some of the other ones are doing an about face. Can I show you? Let me just give you an example of these schmucks, Dave.
Sure.
So much here to go over, but let's see.
There's your girlfriend.
All right. Now she was confronted. Okay. Now this is going to be kind of hard for everybody to see, but you'll hear it, so that's good. Again, we're going to go back to loop back for a second, so don't freak out here. Okay, so this is from Twitter. Let's do it.
What do you say to those who argue that, that vote combined with your thread on Nazism in Ukraine and all the other comments you've made represent a sympathy towards Russia and the Kremlin?
Okay, first off, that's ridiculous and you need to stop. I don't have any sympathy for Putin and Russia, okay? So you can take your pro-Putin garbage and you can take it somewhere else. What Putin is doing in Russia is murderous and it's evil. And I've said so from the beginning. So if you're going to talk about my remarks, talk about all of them, Andrew, and be more honest in your journalism.
Thank you. What do you say?
All right, stop there.
Let me get the Yeti on. Okay, Dave. Let's
There's only two options. Marjorie Taylor Greene is even dumber than I gave her credit for.
Mm-hmm.
And she has been named the dumbest member of Congress, more than Mo Brooks, more than Lauren Boebert. So she's recognized as pretty dumb. Or she is a complete and utter liar. There's no other option.
Right. She's a liar.
She can't say I'm anti-Russia and then vote for Russia.
Right.
It doesn't work.
And promote the idea philosophically that Putin is right about, having this homogenous society and
look, let's be honest.
Cleansing itself of the others.
If Marjorie Taylor Greene has never worn a Klan outfit or a Nazi uniform, we're merely talking fashion, not mindset.
Right.
There's no question that she is for white Aryan supremacy, even if you're the product of incest of 7 generations from the Georgia Pines, have 2 teeth, and your idea of pornography is watching Deliverance over and over again. It doesn't matter to her. Every white person is better than every non-white person. Now, I'm gonna take a little different tactic for a moment, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
You know what concerns me most about this?
Domestically or
No,
Ukraine? Just
the whole thing. It is horrible. It's hard, but it's really taking us out of our game on what we need to do here, right? I believe with all my heart, and I could be wrong, and I hope I'm not, that we have more to fear from the Trumpublicans in this nation than we do from Putin. But because of that horrific idea of nuclear war, nuclear winter, all of that, our focus shifts to that. Not that it shouldn't be there. It's just we have huge problems everywhere. Now, one of the things you can talk all you want about newspapers, and you can talk all you want about radio, and you can talk all you want about television journalism, but you know what the business end of those businesses think by what they put on. Turn on CNN. 45 of the minutes of the hour is devoted to Ukraine, right? So what about these other problems? Now, I'm not trying to say that Putin did this in conjunction with the Proud Boys who are going to do that. It's just my opinion, and that's all I have. I am more worried about destruction from within than I am from destruction from without.
right.
But you still have that Ukraine-Russia conflict, which of course is preoccupying much of Washington's time. Now, I don't know if you were following this week, Brian, some other stories than I was, and this one is the most disturbing I have seen that doesn't involve Donald Trump. Now, you're aware of the time change, right?
Yes.
Are you aware that the Senate overwhelmingly passed a bill that would stop the time change, and we would go with the current time change we had around the year?
Yes.
Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know that they did that without one hearing, without consulting one expert? And what really worries me is this is something Mario Rubio, now Marco, of course, has been fighting for 5 or 6 years. So I'm a little skeptical. The debate is still open. Almost everyone agrees that we shouldn't switch the times, but there's a difference of opinion in the scientific community and in the health community, and especially in the mental health community, which way is better? Is it better to have more light at night, or is it better to have more light in the morning? It depends on where you stand. If you have children, young children who take buses, I think it'd be pretty safe to say that you want them not at the bus stop when it's pitch black. On the other side, businesses feel that they will get more people out after work, where people, instead of having to rush home, will do that. Now, I don't know the answer, but I do know this. It bothered me when I learned that they did this without any hearing or any experts. They don't do anything without bogging it down. So why this? Now, you really want to feel bad tonight, American people? I know from reports of 5 senators across parties, and if there's 5, there's more, who, Brian, didn't even know what they voted for.
Really?
Reporters had to tell them. And they're running this country. So my point is, I don't want to see it end, but getting Donald Trump out and Joe Biden in and this one out and this one in, we're still beyond belief
Right.
in trouble. And we're in trouble from our institutions. The VA is abysmal, okay? Try any government office and the bureaucracy. And now you have senators voting on something that they don't even know about. Now, Sandy, you're absolutely correct.
I agree.
You know why, Sandy? It doesn't, and I've researched that for years, and I feel 100% correct in saying this. High school sports drive the American school system, not academics, not anything else. Now you say, well, what about Texas, Friday Night Lights, Ohio, Pennsylvania? No. We're talking about all the sports. Soccer, women's tennis, field hockey, cross country.
Swimming.
Well, swimming's inside, right? But what I'm saying, they have to start after school. And now buses, now we get in the economy. You have to run buses in schedules. All the mental and emotional health studies that I've seen, because that's where I taught was high school, say that you will see gains. I should say great. You will see gains if you start high schools later, because one way to look at it, teenagers stay up later. They don't get, so they get less rest. And so if they're there, they could do that. Minnesota, which was a pretty progressive state in a number of ways, did that. And their test scores with nothing else went up, their state test scores, right? So, Sandy, again, it appears that money's in America is going to drive the tune. So you can't get enough buses, so you have to schedule them. So you say, well, we'll go with the high school students first so they can get out of school earlier to play sports. Or, and this was a big concern, Brian, you're in the business department, so students can go to work, as if that's their primary concern. Their primary concern should be to get an education. Unfortunately, a lot of kids do have to work to support themselves or their family.
Right.
So again, we don't have any of these pristine, let's go with the science, what it says. And I just can't even find words to describe how disgusted I am with those senators who would vote on anything, one, two, not know what they were voting on, and then turn to reporters and say, oh, I don't know, what was it about? Is that the government we want? Is that the government we need? No. I admire 2 people. If I had to pick the 2 people in government that I admire tonight, I can get one in the Senate and one in the House. They're no-brainers. Bernie Sanders is the best senator, hands down.
I like Governor Whitehouse, too. He's pretty good.
I'm just talking in the Senate, and AOC in the House.
Yes, she's real.
They say the things that America needs to do. I do not think they are saying them for any reason other than they believe them. Bernie certainly isn't saying him so he could become president because he hasn't really changed much, right? In terms of what he said. The only way you might be able to fault Bernie, if you wanted to, is his record on gun control is not the best, but try to get try to get elected in Vermont and be against 100% guns. So that's that trade-off in politics. I'm assuming Bernie said, I can do more good elected than not elected. He would probably vote for, gun repeal, but he's not going to bring it up. So, yeah, everything's bad, Brian. And even if tonight the war ended satisfactorily, right? Even if tonight every Republican realized that they were wrong, that supported Donald Trump, even if tonight the climate crisis, which is threatening to kill us all, would go away, we still have 3 huge problems in America, 2 of which we've had forever. And I could even make an argument you had the third after about 30 years of government. In no particular order, they are systemic racism coupled with white privilege, economic inequality worse than anything ever experienced in America, including the time of the robber barons, and a constitution that makes it impossible for modern American government to work.
Dave, I want to.
So that's all cheery, right?
I want to go in a different direction for a second, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Although it's coming back to our original point. I had a conversation on Skype with a good friend of mine. He's a Russian who left Russia, married a Pole. He lives in Western Poland, and he's told me that he's Russian, but he was technically a Georgian. His family was Georgian, but they had lived in the Soviet Union their entire lives, and his father has hated the communists since 1917, actually. And he said this is kind of rude to say, but it would have been just better if there never had been a Russia, because the world has been hurt by Russia. And Dave, what he said was about this situation. He said, I don't know where you go with this, because Putin put himself in the corner, and it's his fault, but he himself sees no real way out. And he said, what the Ukrainians are doing is nothing short of a miracle, how well that they're fighting. But he said, let's not fool ourselves. He said, Ukraine would never have been able to hold on in any of this if it wasn't for ourselves, for the Americans. Now, he wasn't looking for the credit to give us, so to speak, but he was just saying that without our help, it wouldn't have worked. And he said, it's not Ukraine that Putin really is after. It's us. And I think Anthony kind of alluded to it in the idea that you have more and more border countries. Not forget about the fact that they're NATO, but have the idea that they're doing better than the average Russian, and the Russians look and say, "Oh, wow, they're doing better in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. They're doing better in Poland. They're doing better in Moldavia. They're doing better in Ukraine." And that's the problem. So it's really us he's trying to get back at for so many different things.
Brian, is there a country on continental Europe that's doing worse than Russia overall? I don't know one.
Continental Europe, I can't think of. I know Greece has had problems with inflation, but there's nothing
like
the ruble is worthless. It's absolutely worthless.
And I'm not just talking about now. I'm talking for a fairly long time.
Right.
Now,
but Dave, we know why. It's not like they're stupid. They can produce hypersonic weapons, but the problem is there's so much corruption, and that may play some role in how poorly the Army's doing. The corruption,
Did I read somewhere? And if somebody, I don't think I dreamed this, that their system is like you go in and train and then you come out and somebody else trains. Like they're conscripts for a time, ordered in, and a lot of these had just come in. They weren't really veterans.
And they were wearing, some of them had parade uniforms
Well,
because
that's
they
what they
thought they were going to be conquering heroes coming in
apparently
there.
they thought they were going to be doing that, or they were just good. And see, Putin's done a lot of exercises, right, on borders. So it's not like if tomorrow Biden ordered troops to the Canadian border, that would be weird. But for Putin to move trumps around, but you got to go inside Putin's mind. I think we are his enemy. Why is anybody kind of saying, "Oh, he wants us"? Of course, he wants us. Why?
It's more
wouldn't
about
he
us
want
than
us?
Ukraine.
No, but why wouldn't he want all types of democracy to fall? And if your gentleman that you were talking to is right and is true, we're still the nation that best props up and supports other democracies. So why wouldn't we think that Putin, or not, let me phrase that. Why would anyone be surprised in America that Putin doesn't like us and looks at an America as an enemy? That's what makes this GOP fifth column, Fox News fifth column, so bizarre and so weird
It's
and so
destructive.
awful.
It makes it more difficult for the government to operate.
If we were in some kind of dispute, not a war, with Canada and the United States, I could see Americans saying, right? Well, Canada doesn't have guns, and they have they have socialized medicine, and I could see that. But this isn't that way. This is a person in a form of government in a country that doesn't want the United States to be successful, because indeed, if the United States is successful, Vladimir Putin, is not as successful as he would be. Now, there we are, Canada. Now, the story here, do you realize, Brian, as of yesterday, I didn't check today, there's no provisions to let Ukrainians in to America. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Okay. Now, is that a good thing? I don't think so. You're going to tell me we're very disturbed about a child crying over the body of his dead mother, but we're not disturbed enough to let him come to this country? Is that what you're telling me? Not you, but the people. Well, that's exactly what they're telling me. Then you could take it one step further if you want to. There's more chance of the Ukrainians coming in than there is any person in the Arab world or the African world, right? And we're already seeing that. And a number of Black American leaders are pointing to that. And they're not wrong. Ukrainians are white, except there are Muslims who've crossed and that kind of thing. But for the most part, now, my argument to them would be we were wrong when we didn't bring in war-torn refugees from that area, but that doesn't make it right not to bring them in now to balance out the scales. What's right is to figure out how America can continue to be the beacon of freedom that it proclaims to be, and the land of liberty, and the land will take your huddled masses yearning to be free. And that begins with a trouncing of every Republican elected official in the United States of America. But don't think we're home free then.
No, we're not. We're not.
Because we would need to take all the Democrats and we'd just be ahead a little bit. So it calls for war reform. Well, what's war reform? Brian, let me ask you a question. If this is just you, If they were to nuke any NATO country, would you want the United States to reply at least in kind, if not more?
Well, you're going to have to pick and choose, Dave, where you're going to hit.
It's a hard question, but what do you mean? Just explain yourself.
I'm saying, as an example, like, let's suppose we were brought up what this article said, not the one that you're seeing now. That, like, if they hit Edmonton, well,
that's Edmonton, Canada.
Millions, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, right? Okay,
right.
Because I would think that they would. They honestly, Veg. I'm sorry to have to say this. I have a feeling that, first of all, Russia has a real problem with Canada, because Canada's usually right on. They're the most liberal. I think they would try to test us by hitting Canada first.
All right, let's say that. What do you do?
They hit Edmonton. You've got to. You wouldn't hit Moscow. And this is really disgusting and horrific. But you got to hit something, and I'd say you got to hit St. Petersburg, like the article said. That would be the most likely choice. Their second city. You've got to hit back, and so they know that the next one is going to be this, and of course they're going to then probably hit. Look. Once you start, you can't stop it.
I agree. But my question becomes...
But you can't do nothing.
I'm not saying that.
They take over
and saying, okay, let's change the scenario a little bit. They do not hit they hit Poland with a nuke that they swore was designed for Ukraine and just overflew its borders. Do you come after them then?
Well, they've already had some drones that have gone into like Romania and things like that.
Not talking about nuclear. We're right on nuclear weapons right now.
On nuclear weapons, if say this one more again, because I want to make sure you have it right.
Go ahead.
Are you saying if anything flies over into NATO territory, or are you talking about nuclear weapons per se?
I'm talking about nuclear weapons only. Here's the scenario. They get bogged down. Putin authorizes a strike. We're already seeing that their weapons aren't that effective.
Right.
And their aim is really pretty bad.
Right.
So what the closest they've been, I think, so far is 25 miles, something from the Polish border. So let's just say they shoot off a nuclear warhead of some type. And because of bad planning, or because of bad design, or because of bad whatever thing, that nuclear weapon explodes in Polish territory, causing damage and loss of life.
Then you tell them, look, you got one choice. Excuse me. You send them an immediate message. You send another one up and hit one of your own cities. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, because you got to do something.
I know. But now, like what Nina says, Nina's a smart, intelligent person. I can see from her comments. But I always disagree with that. There's nothing you or I or anyone can suggest to Putin that he hasn't considered. So I always say that when people say, oh, don't say that, they might do that. I don't find that a true argument to not discuss something. Now, that doesn't mean I'm right. That means it's my opinion. But here's the thing, Brian, the point I was trying to make. There are so many variables in this that we don't even know what the appropriate response is. Is it, let's hold off on nuclear weapons altogether? And how does Putin read that if he uses them? Is it, we respond in kind? Is it,
Dave, I think the problem is the question in itself. I think that, as you know, there really is. What you're saying to me is, I think this is where you're going with this, because I know a lot of you out there are probably saying that's the kind of questions are really, they're frightening questions that you've asked.
Of course they are. We're in frightening times.
and we've been through these questions since '62, actually probably before then. Dave, I think this is the problem. We have to all grow up and say, either we figure this out a way that we get along with each other, despite the fact that we're exactly the opposite, meaning Republicans, Democrats, Russians, and we're all neighbors, essentially. It's got to be figured out, or we're going to die.
That I want to address. The scariest time in my lifetime was the 10 days now known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. At the time, I was 10 years old. This is the second time to me the most disconcerting about the use of nuclear weapons, and I'm 70 years old. Now, it's not the 60 years that makes me feel differently. What it is what I know about human nature. Every person involved of age to make decisions in the Cuban Missile Crisis, American and Russian, had witnessed firsthand the horror of two nuclear weapons, one in Nagasaki, right, and one in Hiroshima. There's not a person on the face of the earth who's in any age, really, to make decisions who witnessed that. And so my fear is that removes the restraint. Does it? I don't know. I mean, I think the fear of using the weapons were much greater in 1962 than they are in 2022. Was Khrushchev a madman? I don't think so. Is Putin a madman? Jury's still out on that, right? And, this is a horror. But if anybody really doesn't understand the horror, I would recommend you watch it. It was a BBC film. You can get it on Blu-ray or DVD. For why you couldn't get it anywhere but libraries, it's called Threads. And I believe that is as accurate, even though it's now, maybe almost 30 years old, something like that. There's no survivors of any type merit once you start unleashing nuclear war, and you got the weapons. Do we really think that they're not going to be used? We're going to find out, aren't we?
Well, Veg has said we're all going to have nightmares after the show.
Well, yeah, look.
But I get. It's only because it's in the back of everybody's mind, and you threw it out there. I get it.
No, and I don't want to. Veg is right, but look, sometimes
maybe you need that.
Good to have. Yeah. I'd worry more about people who are going around. Da-di-da-di-da. I'm going out tomorrow and I'm going to play golf and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Or I worry about the ostriches. Let's just put our head, in the sand and bury it. It'll go away. These problems are immense and they're not going away. And Brian, something you said all along, and I agree with you. You picked the problem most pressing that you can deal with. And right now, that's figuring out what to do in this Russian-Ukraine.
Now, Dave, you'll notice here, this is something I wanted to discuss for a minute or two. This is from the White House website, whitehouse.gov, I believe. And it lists all the weapons, at least some of the weapons that we are obviously sending to the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. But it's the last one, and it's interesting how they left it as the last one, which I consider probably the most important of all of them. It says satellite imagery and analysis capability. And I think that's, getting back to my friend from Poland, who's Russian, who said, let's face it, it's basically the United States against Russia. Although we have to say the Ukrainians are the ones that are, they're the ones with the skin in the game.
No,
they're the ones who've done.
right.
So I don't even want to begin to, I worship those people. Okay. But the very fact that the Ukrainians have done a wonderful job, is essentially winning. I mean, if these reports are true, there's over maybe 10,000 Russian soldiers, hundreds of tanks that have been destroyed, and you can't even get planes in the air. The Russians aren't sending planes in the air anymore, very few. They're sending cruise missiles or hypersonic ones, but they've basically been bogged down. And I'm telling you, if we get some more of these types of systems, they'll eventually take out a Russian ship or two in the Black Sea, and then that'll be it. But then
Let me play
you're
devil's advocate.
right, and there's where you're going to go with this. That's okay.
Let me preface it by saying something that is, more people have hated me for this than I think anything I've ever said before. I would say with absolute certainty that two of the worst things to happen to American education was allowing women to actually work at jobs other than those they were reduced to, right? The best and the brightest were either nurses or teachers for the most part. And secondly, when African Americans were not confined and could begin to get jobs. Now, while it was horrible for education, it was great for America and for them. Well, now what I'm going to say is in that similar vein. It would have been better if Putin could have taken the Ukraine in 5 days. Why? If what you're concerned about is nuclear war or an expanding war or whatever, for the moment, that would be done. Would you agree, Brian? For the moment. Yeah, Brian? Would you, if he had taken over in 5 days, can't hear you, Brian.
If you were looking for an out, that was my fault. If you're looking for an outcome where there's no nuclear war and there's less destruction, that is, but you can't speak.
Stop.
I know. Okay,
that's the comparison I made before. Yes, but that's not really. Would it have stopped Putin? No, it might have encouraged them more.
Right.
This is where Vladimir Putin has decided to push America and the West. Now, something group we haven't talked about tonight. I've talked about the Republican traitors. Now I'm going to talk about roughly 110,000 so far, they say, American Ukrainian patriots, and they are some of the best hackers that the United States has. They're messing up the Russian websites and internet. They're causing more damage probably than we could as a government. Why? I hate to use what I'm watching on TV to justify, but I think I'd always wanted to watch the show The Shield. Never got around to it, so Judy and I are watching it now. And the basic story is cops become worse than the criminals to cut the crime. So they remove the shackles of legal systems and law, sort of like Dirty Harry, right? Or the movie Death Wish, or the, Bernard Goetz in New York City. So these hackers they don't have to fight within any parameters set on American cyber security, either the attack division or the defense division. Now, we don't know what impact that is going to have. Will that add to Putin saying, man, I just overstepped this thing? you know, and I got to go back. I don't see that in his personality, but I don't think he's suicidal either. You were saying before, Brian, and I always defer to your expertise on Russia, but I'm not so sure the protests have any impact on Vladimir Putin.
Well,
he doesn't care.
Historically, though,
Historically,
if he loses, if they realize, if and again they have to realize it, that he's losing, his own military may decide to do that.
Do you really think protests in Russia are going to convince them that he's losing? No.
As Morgenstern said to his friend from Ukraine, you grew up in a country where you were not born afraid.
Right.
That in itself tells it. The Russian people don't have it in them to do it. Because a lot of them agree with
Moscow tonight took to the streets against this war, as long as Putin isn't deposed or killed.
Look what happened to Navalny. Navalny was put in prison. He was asking his people to come out, and boy, did he get it wrong, because they didn't come out.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But I don't even think if they did.
Well, remember, was it 1905, or is it, when was the bloody Sunday? 1905, something like that.
It was back around that time.
Okay, so they're just. I mean, that memory of white snow and red blood. It's just.
Well, I'm not impugning the bravery.
They don't. As my friend said, he doesn't care. I said, well. What happens if it's true that 17,000 Russian soldiers have died? I saw one get his head blown off. Horrible. He said he does not care.
Right.
They can cremate the bodies before they even go home.
The morgue already, if the reports are true, and they've kind of been verified from the West.
David, a little bit closer to the mic.
Morgue on the border. The nearest morgue, Russian morgue on the border, they're out of space. I mean, those casualties aren't going to affect him. I don't think the protests of the Russian people, unless there's so many of them, they could mass. He doesn't have a palace. Do you know where he's staying? I don't know where he's staying. I don't think the Russian people know where he's staying.
No, he could be. He could be somewhere next to China.
Very easily, if he was staying in the palace.
He's not near a nuclear plant. You can bet on that.
Well, you'd have more chances, right?
Right.
This is the way. He's not really a terrorist. That gives him too much credit. But how hard it was to find bin Laden. Well, it's like this now. Now he probably has a very small group of bodyguards, for lack of a better term, who, unless they could be bought off somehow, right, are going to protect him. I don't see us getting close enough to assassinate him.
No, that's not going to happen.
I don't see, like I said, I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. You always say that. I'm going to say that tonight. But I don't see the Russian people even. I agree with you. I think it's a different. I think it's okay. Yes, it's tremendously brave what the Ukrainians are doing.
And there are a few brave Russians. You saw it on that television broadcast.
I could even make an argument that what the Russians that are protesting are doing is somewhat braver than what the Ukrainians are doing.
Because you're on an island there, right?
Right, and you're just there, and ain't too many people with you. So we're back kind of where we started tonight, which is we're in deep. We seem to be sucking. It seems to be sucking us a little deeper, and I don't have a way to resurface. Now, the nice thing is there are hundreds, thousands, I don't know, people in American who are smarter than I am. And hopefully they're going to be able to answer these questions that we have. But right now, we don't know what's going to happen. Now, Rudel, I know, and that's an area that I'm really ignorant on, and I got to do some more. I do know that Russia went into Afghanistan and it came out, right? And I they were not successful, if whatever they tried to do. My limited experience, though, is that now they didn't really ever have the goal of annexing Afghanistan, did they, Brian? I don't know.
They wanted to transform it, and they couldn't do it.
Well, but transforming it is different than occupying it.
No,
right?
They tried to transform it, but no.
I'm not saying transforming it, but I'm saying Ukraine, they want that, or Vladimir Putin wants that to be part of Russia. The reasons he wants it is immaterial. So I don't know. I think, obviously body bags, as perverse as they are, had a big impact on us and our feelings toward Vietnam. A lot of the young Americans don't realize that when that war first started, I bet you support for America was, of those who would, identify, I bet you it was in the high 80s or low 90s. So what changed? The fact it bogged down. We get the reports, we see. And you know who really had the biggest impact on that war? Were journalists. Once they got out there and started reporting it, whether they were the biggest in the world that time, Walter Cronkite, or new young breaking reporters who today are the emeritus of the journalistic industry, Seymour Hersh, David Halberstam. It was just, you began to question, well, Maxwell Taylor says we're winning, but David Halberstam, who was out there, said we're not. Russia doesn't have that, right? In Russia, they're winning. In Russia,
Right.
Ukraine
Right.
started this.
Right.
In Russia, the Americans are sending the weapons directly and ordering the Ukrainians to attack the Russians. In Russia, there are Nazis in Ukraine, and Putin is on record as saying, I'm not going to allow this. Basically, remember, and playing on the memory, remember what the Nazis did to your parents or grandparents or great-grandparents. And that's why whoever controls the media, it's so important. And that's bringing it back to America. I, being a First Amendment supporter, I don't know what you do with Fox News, but I don't think you can continue to let it operate in the way that it's operating. You have to either put some restrictions on that particular organization or OAN or that. But maybe better is to go back to something like the fairness doctrine. If you're going to say something about this, then you need someone saying the opposite about it with equal time. I mean, I don't know what the answers are. And maybe we're too far gone. I don't know. I mean, I can't believe that Americans in the numbers that we see are saying, go Russia, go. In 1980, I didn't hear anybody say
there aren't too many that are doing that right now, but
and Brian, all we really know.
I'll say this. Can I interrupt, Dave?
Go ahead.
I'm saying this not so much that there's too many of them are supporting Putin. It's just, though, I think they still hate Democrats and Biden more
it doesn't matter
than the Russians.
Reason. I mean, I know what you're saying.
Look, here, my cousin, the asshole.
That's just as dangerous.
Hold on. Right? I'm going to read this. I got this one today. I didn't even answer the schmuck.
Go ahead.
So, it says here, Russia's threatening nuclear war. Biden is going to give the Iranians good status The borders are just flooding and gas prices are so high. Inflation is out of control. Everything he does turns to shit. He's anti-American. He doesn't like America. He doesn't like someone needs to take this piece of shit out. That's
They
the
were
way
talking
he
about
thinks.
Donald Trump, right?
Yeah, I wish.
No, Brian. They were talking about Joe Biden.
Right, that's my cousin. He's an idiot.
Now, with the last comment, if we could remove that, somebody needs to take this piece of shit out,
Right.
Which implies by any
Right.
means necessary. I would say all that about Donald Trump, and that's what I think is unique. We're saying the same things, but about two different versions of America, led by two different parties with two different people at the head of that party, right? So they say it about Biden, the Democrats. Are they flawless? No, absolutely not. But I don't think they're trying to destroy America the way that I see Donald Trump. Did you see the picture? I think I might even have posted it. It's an older picture. And again, look, I work for journalism. You don't make pictures live, but if you take 1,000 pictures of someone, you get the best. They can make them look ugly, but there's a picture of him just looking with so much admiration at Vladimir Putin. Now, is that because he owes Putin from his business dealings? Perhaps. Is it simply because he's envious of the way Putin was able to run Russia? And don't think for a minute that Trump wouldn't like that in America.
Right.
Is it a combination of, I can't conceive of an American president in my lifetime looking at an enemy leader with this idea of, oh my God, wow, you are really, I wish I could be you. And that's exactly what Trump, and so the people that follow Trump are drawn into it. And you were saying, Brian, you don't know the numbers. We don't. There's no poll right now that's accurate to say how many of the Oath Keepers, how many of the Proud Boys, how many of the Klan, how many of just Republicans, how many evangelicals are supporting Putin and his stance. So it could be a lot more support for Putin here than we know. Now, I would find it, I think those numbers would not be reflected in our military armed forces. I think we would have people who, the armed forces could be very divided about Republicans and Democrats and conservatives and liberals. But I think for the most part, they understand the idea of Putin and war. So that is something we have going for us. Our troops, there was a concern that in a domestic situation they could turn. I don't think in an international situation they're going to. Can we say anything cheerful tonight for the people?
I don't know, Dave. It's well, you can't. You really can't, because as I said at the beginning of the broadcast, it feels like, at least I said in the promo, the world's on fire, and the Russian people don't really, as you said, they don't really know that, but it is that serious. And Ronnie and I have been talking about this just about every night, and
Right.
we both, ebb and flow with how terrified we are. But it's again, I go back to my father in World War II, and your father served also. My dad said 1939. He knew it was going to come. We stayed out of it, but I think I have that thing with my father as far as it's going to come.
Well, your father was right
And you knew my father. You spoke with him.
No, he was right on that. Now, again, remember, I read Plot, Against America when it first came out because I love everything Philip Roth has ever written. But there was that really good series, right? And you watched it. And there was a lot of two kinds of sentiment. Keep us out of any European conflict after World War I. And secondly, a lot
At
of
what
those,
price, though, Dave? You know, like
no, I
that's
know.
the thing. How do you
What I'm
watch
saying is,
these people get killed, and you just can't take it anymore at some point?
because, Brian, that's a no-brainer. Because you hate Jewish people the same way that Hitler hated Jewish people, but you don't have the nerve to kill them. And so he's doing your work for you. Now, there were some, maybe like Charles Lindbergh, who was just messed up, and because he pinned a few medals on him, who initially was a strong supporter, not of, but wasn't disturbed by fascism until Hitler got, was JFK's dad, because it would interrupt his business.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, when Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese, and we're not going to go into the details of who set that up and did we know and did FDR sit on it. The fact is they attacked. He didn't force them to attack. And that rallied America. And the hard thing is right now, America is being attacked by gas prices and these other things. But a large percentage of the American people are blaming the current president rather than the oil companies who are making record profits. Putin, because of what he's done, has disrupted, the flow of oil everywhere. So it's almost like
It's actually not so much the flow of oil as it is it's affected the price of oil in terms of the markets. Like I said, we don't want to go into this whole conversation again, but I think in the long run, it's still a good thing that the prices go up because we have to move away from this. When we're going to in 50 years.
You and I part company on that, and I'll tell you why. You apparently have more faith in the American people than I do. I don't think the fact if gas goes to $7 or $8 or $9 a gallon, that's not going to necessarily drive them to understand that we should be with solar and wind. I don't know. I may be wrong, but do you really? I mean, what's it going to take, Brian? It's out there.
Right.
If we don't do something dramatic, if not the entire world, a large percentage of it is going to be destroyed, and the rest of it is not going to be anything like considered normal.
Right.
Right? And do we do anything? Now, and let's look at the politics of it. People sometimes get upset with me, a lot of things, but I refuse to say I'm a Democrat. You know why? Because if I say I'm a Democrat, I join the party and I support Manchin and Sinema. And I don't. They're Republicans. They may use a Dem. It may have helped them. I don't know. Maybe once they were Dem. I don't know. But so it doesn't just mean the Republicans are bad, the Democrats are good. And as we point out tonight, Brian, if nothing else, there's a lot to fear, but there's no easy answers to snap your fingers and eliminate it. And I suppose if someone were to say we were back in, first men and we're emerging from the cave, it was probably more danger then, but it wasn't worldwide. You know, it wasn't really until 1945, with the dropping of those two bombs, that war became something strictly different than it ever was before. And now we're in a conflict where both sides have access to nuclear weapons. And we just have to hope that both sides are able, however the situation unfolds, not to use them. And I'm not so sure Putin will do that.
You know, and if there's any doubt into the effectiveness of, I probably shouldn't go here, of religion. Like, now's the time you say, well, we need the big guy to come in and kind of settle things. This is the one we have to settle because there's nobody coming. There's nobody coming.
I laugh about that. You know, we agree in certain ways, and I think we agree on. I have no use personally for any organized religion, simply because they're led by men, or men and women, mankind. But what is interesting, I think your point is well taken. But even if there were a God, I still think he would want, or she would want us, or it would want us to figure out our own way. I mean, you know, what you're going to pray for God, and he or she or it is going to send all the nuclear missiles to the great white clouds in the sky? No. So now I do have something optimistic to say tonight. I do. If anybody listening tonight, or anybody who later comes in this, if you have someone you love, hopefully you have more than one, but if you just have one, realize how beautiful that is. Sometimes that's all we have. So Brian, I'm going to use you as an example. You have to be nicer to Ronnie than you've ever been, and you're a good husband. But right now, we're all undergoing shell shock.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. It's Republicans,
I know,
it's
but what
gun
I'm saying
violence,
is,
it's global warming,
you know,
it's all hitting.
But I guess even if people don't agree with me, there's a chance to do a lot of good in the world as an individual. Now, you're not going to change it. I like hearing, yeah, peace. Hell, I was out in the streets for peace in 1968. But I don't know that peace can ever become universal. We have those negative things in our construction: hate, greed, envy, lust, anger. And I would submit that they may be more powerful motivators in the short run than empathy and love in the short run, and with large groups. So you can really only control two things. Can't control what's around you, never could, never will be able to. You can try to control how you react to it. And then you can look at the people you love and figure out how you can share more of that. Now, I'm not saying, let's not say that's good. That ain't going to stop us from getting blown to kingdom come. But it's going to make sure the minutes that we have here are the best they can be for the people that are most important to us.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want everybody to run out tonight and confess all their sins. That's not about that. It's about really looking at what you can control. And Brian, you and I differ on this too. You're very much a determinist. And I think there's a great number that I just think there's a portion of free will, and we're never going to agree on that, and that's fine. But either way, we have limited control. We have no control over what Vladimir Putin does. None. We have no control over what Joe Biden does. We have no control over what the Senate does. You know, we get to vote for one person. Think about the Democrats that voted for Joe Manchin. Even that can be turned around, right?
Right.
Or former Green Party advocate Kristen Sinema. Or I'm sure the voters in Georgia, in her district, Marjorie Taylor Greene, unless they get, some really super Democratic candidate, will probably win by larger numbers than she did because she has far more money and she's more known. And that's another problem in the world. And we can't worry about the world right now. We worry about America. Celebrity is more important than any other factor, right, in success. Show me one damn thing the Kardashians have done to make the world a very, or even a better place. And yet, look at the Twitter numbers that they have versus, any intellectual that you admire. There are good Christians. People might dispute that. That's fine. I believe there are good Christians. There's good all kinds of people, but we look at celebrities. It's just something else. It's kind of related, but not really to this. I'm going to call out an author that I really like. I don't know. Brian, have you read anything by Chuck Klosterman at all?
Not that I know about him? Not.
No. I would advise everybody to get. He's got about 10 books out. Pick any one. And first of all, he's a great writer, but he also says his thoughts. And I finished one of his books today, and it's kind of tangential to what we're talking about. He said the most evil person representative is Hitler, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said he wasn't justifying Hitler. He's just saying that's it. But he said, and I thought this was interesting. He said probably a 7 or 8 year old in America could draw, a stick figure of Hitler with the little mustache, right? They probably ran across it. He said, but if you look at sheer numbers killed, Stalin and Mao might have killed far more. But can any Americans draw those pictures? Because we're such a visual culture, right? That accounts for more in terms of evilness and accounts for more in terms of good. So, O.J. Simpson, people knew a lot about him. Rodney Young, my student, who is waiting for execution in Georgia, 20 of us knew him well. O.J. got off. Rodney didn't and shouldn't because he did murder someone. But, should he be executed? So if we do all this, you've still got celebrity and fame and, oh my God. So just
by the way, I'm looking at this
each
news.
Other people, each
here,
other.
Dave,
Right.
Biden's going to go to Europe next week. Should he take a pop visit to Ukraine or not? Too risky?
No, I think he should. Do you know why?
But send a message. He's doing what Zelensky would do.
Here's the thing. Yes, you're right. Zelensky might be the worst person in the world. He's not, but let's just say he was. But he's doing all the right things, right? He's staying there. He's fighting, or at least he's there. Mm-hmm. He seems to be going on the streets. And I think if Biden wants to portray an image of strength for America and an image of strength for himself, I think he goes. I think there'd be people who would try to talk him out of it because we need you, Mr. President. What if? Now, you notice that leaders, American presidents, have gone to war sites before. we didn't know it till after they were back up, in the sky returning. So I don't think he announces it necessarily. You don't. It's only important that you go.
Mm-hmm.
It's not important to say I'm going and then go. In fact, that might even be counterproductive. I'm going and then a crisis comes up and you don't go. So, but if I were Joe Biden and I had the decision to make myself, I would go. But again, it's not his decision solely to do, right? He has to listen to his advisors. He has to consider what's best for America. He has to consider, and only he knows, is his vice president ready to take over? Because let's face it, they may say they do. Presidential candidates do not, let me repeat it again, do not make their number one criteria, can this person be president if something happens to me? They make their first criteria, can this person help us as a team get elected? Now, they're not going to choose necessarily somebody like that who can't be president, right? So we don't know all that. Would you go if you were Biden?
I'd certainly stay on the west side, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to go into the war zone and pull, and unveil an X on his chest and say, hit me with a missile. The mere fact that he shows up in the Ukraine is enough if that's indeed what he feels is best for America and himself. And if he doesn't, I will not fault him in the least. I'm just saying what I think I would do if he's got his allies back. I'd also listen to them. He's got to have, Brian, one or two world leaders, especially for the number of years he's been in, that he respects more than the others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's got a brain trust, and it's a political brain trust. Bill, every night he went to bed with Hillary. I guess some nights he didn't, but every night he did, he had a very wise, politically expeditious Lady Macbeth type to his Macbeth, right? And they could talk about what's best for power. I don't think Donald Trump had that, but if he had it, he wouldn't have listened to it. We know of a couple first ladies who ran the country. Certainly Woodrow Wilson's wife did that after he had his stroke and nobody knew. Certainly Nancy Reagan, as dementia ate away at Ronald Reagan. So they were, whether they were good advisors or not, they were there. And maybe out of all this, if this leads in any way, if we survive, and this leads in any way to the downfall of Donald Trump, that's one good thing. I don't think it'll lead to the downfall of the Republican Party, because I think there are people ready to be Donald Trump too, not named Trump. The name that surfaces all the time, and you have to consider that, is Ron DeSantis. And I used to think Governor Abbott at Texas was the worst. I don't think he's electable as president. I think DeSantis is electable. And so he becomes my prime target of let's get rid of Trump, but let's start working on getting rid of DeSantis too. Who do you most fear, Brian? We'll come back to politics. What political figure in America today, and by fear, I don't mean personally fear. I mean, fear has the most negative possibilities for America?
I would say it'd have to go with somebody with the highest education and the most deviant type of behavior, which I'd probably have to say, I don't know. I mean, there's so many.
Isn't that a hard question?
I mean,
It's not for lack of candidate.
Hawley was the one who had the extreme intelligence in law school, but he's such an asshole, and you can't even imagine his intelligence. DeSantis is a problem. But I'm saying Trump kind of still has that power. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm much more worried about Fox News than I am about any one candidate.
Great answer, not because
It's because of the power of
I think it's
propaganda.
great.
It worked really well in
Brian,
Russia. It worked in Germany.
from day one. It worked long before there was an America. Do you know why we have an America? One of the main reasons? The power of propaganda. We being those called patriots who wanted to leave England, we had more people with printing presses. We had more people with elegant speech, elevated, right? We had more of the not wealthy, but seeing that their wealth would jump in leaps and bounds, right? If we could get rid of England. Actually, probably some of the most wealthy were those, if you weren't a landholder, if you were a merchant, many of the merchants wanted to stay with England because England was buying our products. But propaganda. And anybody doesn't believe that, just go back and look at those posters. Look at the "Don't Tread on Me." I mean, that's classic. That's propaganda.
Right. Well, Dave, I'm going to shut
All
it
right, kids.
down. I
Yeah,
do
we'll
have
shut
a
down.
video to show everybody. It was from 1990 when I was in Kiev. I think I'll just kind of end it that way because I do feel horribly. I mean, look, I have Ukrainian blood in me. It's kind of small
You also
amount,
have you also have Venusian blood in you.
yeah, Venusian blood,
But,
right? So,
Brian, let me just say to the people before we go, thank you. And to anybody who worries, what should I say, about facing the darkness, I'm not, you have to work with the darkness the way you have to work with it. But I've never found not talking about it to be somewhat cathartic. I think not talking about it, it goes inside you and it's buried there and it eats at you just like corrosive acid. So if tonight anyone thinks, some jokingly, that's fine. We even say ourselves, this was not a fun, joyful program, but this is not a fun, joyful time. So
No.
thank you for tuning in
Thank
and
you,
love
Dave.
one another. And don't love Putin, don't love Trump.
right. I think, ladies and gentlemen, to send you off here to Kiev in a better time. I kind of remember what Zelensky said. It was kind of profound. He said, I'm 45, but looking at all those children who died, those infants, he said, age means nothing at that point. Whether you were 70 or you were 25, when you see a 3-year-old infant murdered for no good reason, there's never a good reason, but in the most horrific of ways, it's just horrific that at some point the age doesn't even matter. It just doesn't really matter. So I'll try to end on a positive note. And this will be Kiev. This was me on a trip to Kiev. It was actually my first trip to the Soviet Union. So hope you enjoy.
Brian, is those hookers you have mentioned, are they in this video at all?
No, Dave.
Okay, I just wondered.
I don't have any numbers for you here. All right.
No, I'm not. No, you were just talking about them. I don't.
Okay. Yeah. No. And here we go.